Okay, Perek Zion 1258 in the Chumashim. Let's see. Let's mute everybody. Okay. Everybody. Hello. I have to mute. Yeah. Okay. Just mute yourself so that we don't have any interference. Okay. Okay. Let's begin. Perek Zion. The end of Haman. So the king and Haman came to the feast with Queen Esther. This is feast number 2 that she's throwing, right? Vayomer HaMelech leEsther, gam bayom hasheni b'mishteh hayayin, ma she'elatech Esther HaMalka v'tinaten lach, u'ma bakashosech chatzi hamalchut v'teyas. And the king asked Esther again on the second day of the wine feast. This is the second feast. What is your request, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. What is your petition? Even if it's up to half the kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Pasuk Gimel, Vatan Esther HaMalka v'tomer, Im matzasi chen beinecha hamelech, im al hamelech tov tinasein li nafshi b'shelasi v'ami b'vakashasi. So Queen Esther answered and said, if I have won your majesty's favor, and it pleases the king, let my life be granted to me as my request, and my people as my petition. King Nimkarnu Aniva Amila Shmid La Rog Ulabed Vilu Lavadim Lishfachot Nimkarnu Hecharashti Ki Ein Sar Shove Benezek Hamelech. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to be exterminated. Had we been sold as slaves and servant girls, I would have had to keep quiet, for the adversary is not worthy of the king's damage. Thereupon King Achashverosh exclaimed and said to the queen, who is it? Where is the one who dared do this? Vatomer Esther, Ish tsar ve'oyev Haman hara hazeh, va'aman niv'at lifnei hamelech v'hamalka. And Esther said, an adversary and an enemy. This wicked Haman trembled in terror before the king and the queen. V'amelech kam b'chamatom mishteh hayayin al ginat habitan, v'amad amad levakesh al nafsho me'Esther hamalka kira ki chalsa elav hara meis hamelech. The king rose in rage from the wine feast and went into the palace garden, while Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life, for he saw that the king's evil determination against him was final. Pasuk Ches. והמלך שב מגינת הביתן אל בית המשתה מיין, והמן נופל על המיטה אשר אסתר עליה, ויאמר המלך, הגם לכבוש את המלכה עמי בבית? הדבר יצא מפי המלך פני המן חפוי. When the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet room, Haman was prostrated on the couch upon which Esther was. So the king exclaimed, would he actually assault the queen while I'm in the house? As soon as the king uttered this, they covered Haman's face. Vayomer charvona echad mihan hasarisim t'nei hamelech, gam hinei ha'etz asher asa Haman leMordechai asher diber tov al hamelech omed beveit Haman gova 50 amah. Vayomer hamelech tulu alav. Then Charvona, one of the chamberlains in the attendance of the king, said, furthermore, the 50-cube-high gallows which Haman made for Mordechai, who spoke good for the king, is standing in Haman's house. And the king said, hang him on it. And the king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows which he had prepared for Mordechai, and the king's anger abated. This is the story of Haman's end, isn't it? It's the second shortest chapter in the entire Megillah. This is the second shortest chapter. The shortest chapter, of course, is number 10. Is just the few last psukim of the Megillah. The Rav studies the words of Esther very closely in this chapter to appreciate her strategy, the brilliance of her strategy, and the wording is crucial to pay close attention to what she is doing and what she is thinking to convince the king that Haman is enemy number 1, not enemy number 1 against the Jews, but enemy number 1 against Achashverosh. The Rav feels this chapter, which, as I pointed out, is the second shortest chapter in the Megillah, demonstrates how in history there are times when one person is given the role to be responsible for the whole nation. In this case, it was a young woman transformed into the leader of the Jewish people, and she saved the Jewish people. It's moments like this that one person rises to the occasion, and that person becomes the face of the entire nation. And this is the lesson here in this parak as well. Somebody's waiting. Okay. Let's take a look. The Rav starts at the very beginning. Pasuk base. Vayomer HaMelech Esther. Gam bayom hasheni b'mishta hayayim. Mashe losech Esther hamalka v'tinosein loch. Uma bakashasei achatzi hamalchus v'teyas. And right away, what happens? It's the second party. And immediately, what does Achashverosh do? Achashverosh offers her. She doesn't even ask anything. Achashverosh offers her. Rabbi Norman Lamb, Zichrono Livracha, in his commentary on Megillah, notes that there's an important lesson that you cannot afford not to notice, and that is the lesson of the major role that wine plays in this book. How many parties are there? Does anybody know? Mentioned in Megillat Esther? 10. There are 10 parties, 10 drinking parties mentioned in this Megillah. Wine is at the essence of the entire story. And the notes the contrast is crucial. The contrast between Achashverosh and Haman on one side of the equation, and what should we say, the entire Persian culture on one side, and Esther and Mordechai on the other side. How do they focus? How do they deal with wine is so important. Achashverosh and Haman and the entire Persian society imbibed wine not only because they wanted to feel good, not only because they wanted to party, but they were doing something else in their lives. What were they doing? They were avoiding confronting the pain that comes with life. In this story, it's clear they're using wine as a means to avoid confronting that which life offers us that isn't so pretty. Achashverosh, it was important because he was insecure, he was paranoid, and he thought that the wine would cover it all up for him. But what happens with wine? Wine wears off, and you're left with what you started with. That's the problem with wine. This is exactly what Shlomo HaMelech taught us in Koheles, Perek Beis, Pasuk Gimel. Tarti b'libi limshoch bayayin et bisari, Shlomo HaMelech writes. I decided to pamper myself with wine. And what happens, Rabbi Lamb notes, if life seems painful, if existence is filled with sharp agonies, then perhaps it is best to take a drink and drown one's sorrow. That is the thinking, right? It's miserable out there. I might as well hit the bottle. This is the answer of drunkenness, overwhelming the senses either by pleasure or immorality or narcotics or liquor or any other excess. Solomon King Shlomo HaMelech tries this technique, but what does he say in the end? It didn't do anything for me. It didn't make me happy. It simply does not work, King Solomon says. For after the spirits are spent, the spirit remains just as low. After the spirits are spent, the spirit remains just as low. Sooner or later, one must wake up, rise out of the drunken stupor, Rabbi Lamb writes, and face the sober facts of life. The frustration and the pain remain unchanged, even when they are covered with the haze of alcohol. But they thought that they could use alcohol to confront their problems, and that was Achashverosh and Haman and the entire society they lived in. And Esther understood differently. Rav Soloveitchik notes, if you pay attention in the Torah, the concept of simcha always is associated with the words lifnei Hashem. Lifnei Hashem. Simcha, if you take a look throughout the Torah, the idea of being happy is always associated with lifnei Hashem. To be happy in the Jewish sense does not mean to ignore life's hardships and pain. Instead, it means the knowledge that we are not alone in our difficulties. Our simcha is lifnei Hashem. Our simcha comes with the realization that God sympathizes with us, and our pain is not senseless. Simcha means there is hope, or as Rabbi Lamb writes, even better than that. even simcha doesn't only mean hope, it means there's meaning to life. There's meaning in life. And Rabbi Lamb beautifully coins the following: better pain that is purposeful than pleasure that is pointless. Better pain that is purposeful than pleasure that is pointless. And this was the philosophy of Esther and Mordechai, contrasted with Haman and Achashverosh. Very important element to pay close attention to in the study of Megillat Esther. Now take a look at Pasuk Beis. Vayomer HaMelech LeEsther, Gam Bayom HaSheni, Ma she'elasech, right? He says, Bayom HaSheni b'mishteh hayayin, Ma she'elasech Esther HaMalka, v'tinasein loch, u'ma bakashaseich achatzi ha'malchus v'teyos. He immediately offers her, what would you like? This banquet sounds like a repeat of banquet number 1 that she threw for Achashverosh and Haman. The only difference is that this time, the king already offers Esther to satisfy her wishes even before she even opens her mouth. Was this dangerous on Achashverosh's part? 100%. Why is this dangerous on Achashverosh's part? Because Achashverosh has failed in the story to pay close attention to the devil is in the details. And Achashverosh doesn't pay attention to the details. Achashverosh doesn't think out the consequences of what he's doing. He has a record of making bad decisions based on the fact that he doesn't fully appreciate the consequences of his actions. He killed his wife Vashti. He almost lost all of the Jews from his empire, which would have been a disaster, and we're going to talk about that. And that's what Esther is pointing out to him, by the way. We will see that. That would have been a disaster for him, just like it has been a disaster historically for every country that has expelled and destroyed the Jews. What happens to the country afterwards? Every country fails afterwards. It comes crushing down. It was an empire before, and then it fails afterwards. So he kills his wife Vashti because he doesn't pay attention to consequences. He almost loses the Jews from his empire because he doesn't pay attention to consequences. He almost lost his new wife because he doesn't pay attention to consequences. All because he rushed into
Sure, hold on, let me just ask her.
without knowing what he's doing. Please put yourself on mute.
Hi, how are you?
Please put yourself on mute. Somebody is not muting themselves. Okay, thank you. Either this indicated that Achashverosh was simply not bright enough to pay attention to learn from his mistakes, and Chazal say that. Chazal say it was one of their attitudes in the Gemara is that Achashverosh is not a bright man, not at all. And he doesn't learn from his previous mistakes. Or perhaps this is his approach to royal protocol. Don't take what I say literally. And Esther doesn't take Achashverosh literally. Why doesn't she take him literally? Because the Jews did not take up half of the kingdom or even a fraction of the kingdom. She's not interested in Chatzi Malchus. She realizes that's hyperbole. It's just not, you don't take that literally. Rather, Esther brilliantly used this moment to do what? What is she using this moment to do? A strategy to demonstrate that Haman is the enemy of the king. That's what she's using this moment for. She's not focusing, oh, I can take anything you want to give me. That's not my interest. My interest is switching the tables and turning the tables around and making Haman, in your eyes, Achashverosh, and you're going to open your eyes to see Haman is not your friend. That's what she does. Her strategy unfolds seamlessly. And yet, it would be a mistake for the reader who's reading the Megillah to think that this was easy for Esther to manipulate. This was, our Chazal tell us, very difficult. And she was cloaked in divine inspiration, Beruach HaKodesh. What does that mean? It means that without Hashem's hands in this strategy, it would have failed. Chazal, interesting, in the Megillah in Tes Zayin Amud Aleph, in Masechtas Megillah, in the Gemara in Tes Zayin Amud Aleph, suggests that Esther almost accused by mistake, and sometimes when you're dealing with a strategy against an enemy, just one move wrong can be a disaster for your whole strategy. And Chazal pick up in Tes Zayin Amud Aleph and says, when she was ready to point, when he asks, Achashverosh asks, and who is the enemy? Her finger, the Gemara says, was going to Achashverosh. And the angel, the Malach, pushes her hand to point to Haman. What does the Gemara mean? The Gemara is not just a cute story. The Gemara is telling you, really, you have to really understand it. The Gemara is really telling you that she had a difficult time implementing her strategy. It could have gone wrong at any moment. It could have been a disaster at any moment. Only works because she plans well and Hashem is guiding her. This is all reflected in how she runs the entire story. And through words in this chapter, you will see this come to fruition. Continue on, Pasuk Gimel. Vatan Esther Hamalka. Now she responds to his request. Tell me, what do you want? Vatan Esther Hamalka. What does she say? Vatomer, Ima tzasi chen beinecha hamelech, v'ima lamelech tov tinasein li nafshi b'she'elasi v'ami b'vakashasi. It's important to note how masterfully Esther constructs her plea with the exact choices of words. The way she addresses the king in this pasuk. Take a look. I want you to go back to chapter 5, psukim 4 and 8, because you have to see this. Go back to 5, to page 1256 if you're using the Art Scroll Chumash, right? Let's take a look. Go back to chapter 5, pasuk 4. Vatomer Esther, it's at the end of page 1256. Vatomer Esther ima al hamelech tov. Yavo hamelech v'hamon hayom elam ishteh asher asisi lo. Esther says, if it pleases whom? The king. Let the king and Haman come today to the banquet. What tense is that? What kind of speech is that? That's third person speech. It's not, what second speech? If I speak to you and I say, you, that's second speech. If I say, Miriam, that's first person speech, right? But you is second person. If I say like town meeting, like they do in yeshivas, right? With the Rosh Yeshiva, they want to show special respect. But what have they done by that special respect? They've distanced themselves. Correct. If what would the boys come back to the yeshiva and they think they need to talk to me in third person, and they say, what does the Rav say? And I said, I have no idea. He passed away in 1993. And they go, what? Yeah, I don't know what Rabbi Soloveitchik had to. No, I mean you. I said, you can say you. You don't have to talk to me in third person, right? But she's talking, what she's doing in chapter 5, verse 4, when she's inviting him to the first party. Third person, Hamelech. What does Hamelech want, right? Go down to Pasuk 8. Pasuk 8 on page 1257. Im matzasi chen beinecha hamelech v'im al hamelech tov laseis eshay lasi v'lasos bakashasi. And even when she invites him now, you want to know what I want? Yavo hamelech v'haman. That the king and Haman come to the party that I'm going to throw in your honor. It's in the third person. Now let's take a look in this pasuk here. Now page 1258. Is everybody following? Pasuk Gimel, you see, Vatan Esther Hamalka, Vatomer, Imatzosi Chain, what's the next word? Be'enecha, what's be'enecha? In your eyes, it's gone from third to second. V'im out, right? Be'enecha hamelech, v'im al hamelech, topti nosein li nafshi b'shelasi v'ami b'vakashasi. It's suddenly switching, it is switched, and it's masterful. What has she done? When she invites Achashverosh to the first party, it's respect. It's a distance. She words it in a distance. Now, however, it's a more intimate, more informal kind of language. She is pleading, Erica Brown points out in her beautiful work on Esther, Erica Brown saying, and I quote her, she's pleading for her own life by also implying, without being so tactless as to say it directly, that the king is about to lose the person dearest to him and most intimate to him. Wake up, king. realize the ramifications. If I get killed, I'm the person that's closest to you. I'm the person that is intimate with you. Realize, what is she doing? She does this via the use of now second person, because she's doing what? She's doing what? She's making her and him one. Your destiny and my destiny are one, because she has what? Yes, but she's starting to use the second, which she has not used up until now, right? So she does this because she has the difficult task of building her case against Haman. And what does she want to do, most of all? To turn, it's not my issue, it's our issue. She had to make the case subtly that the king had been manipulated, indeed duped by whom? Haman, right?
She's also reminding him how lonely and upset he was.
Right, she's 100%. She's reminding him exactly. By switching to the second person form of address, she makes Achashverosh and her one unit. Take a look now on Pasuk. These are all, you have to pay close attention to the wording in this chapter. It's brilliant on how she's manipulating the situation and turning the tables. Now go to Pasuk Dalet. כי נמכרנו אני ועמי להשמיד, להרוג ולאבד, ואילו לעבדים ולשפחות נמכרנו החרשתי, כי אין הצורך שווה בנזק המלך. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, slain, and exterminated. Had we been sold as slaves and servant girls, I would have kept silent. Why is that brilliant? Why is that brilliant? What is she suggesting? This is Rav Soloveitchik notes. Whoa, 1 second. Read that pasuk again. Yeah. She's turning to Achashverosh and said, listen, he wanted to do, and we know the story. We know it's Haman, but she's building it up, and she says, if they had suggested the man who had planned to harm us would have put us where? In concentration camps, in labor camps, I couldn't have argued. But that's not what he did. He did what? He suggested that we be annihilated. Why would putting us in a concentration camp, in a labor camp, be a panacea for her? But that's what she sounds like she's saying. And the Rav says it's a brilliant on Esther. This is such a brilliant move and a strategy. Why? What she's demonstrating to the king was that Haman had no interest in promoting the king's welfare. He was only interested in promoting his own agenda. His own agenda is, I got to get rid of the Jews. What does that mean to the king? And she's demonstrating it's negative for the king. Why is it negative for the king? For 2 reasons. One, if you had secluded us in labor camps and concentration camps, we would have been no threat to the king. We've been out of the cities, out of the villages. We'd have been secluded and watched, right? It would have been very similar to what we know America did inappropriately during World War II to the Japanese. They were worried, so what? Let's get them secluded. They might be dangerous to us, right? If you're paranoid, they might be dangerous to you. It was a terrible moment in American history. We know that today, but we understand, and this is what she's saying. I would have never argued. If you would have done that to the Jews, I could never have said. But why number 2? What was she also pointing out? If you annihilate us, what happens to the economy? It takes a dip. Of course, if we're alive, we have to work for the king. We bring taxes, we bring money. The economy is, from your perspective, Mr. King, it is not beneficial what he's suggesting. And I would have been silent because I couldn't have argued. This is exactly what Esther is telling the king. If only this is what Haman had suggested, then I would have had no argument. But what Haman suggested to you, the king, the annihilation of the Jews, did not take the king's concerns into equation, right? And the Rav also notes there's another thing happening here. And for a paranoid king, this is a disaster. If you allow the people, the masses, to go out and annihilate the Jews, how are they going to do that? That means that you have to open up your arsenals of your weapons, correct? and you're sending out weapons into the masses. For any king, any leader, that is not a good idea. Certainly for a paranoid king, that's beyond the question, right? And that's what Esther is telling him. Esther, it's brilliant. And the Rav points this out. What Esther is playing to is, tell me, are your concerns, King Ahasuerus, being taken into account if you annihilate the Jews? No. You're going to tell me, are you going to allow the masses to have all of these weapons out there uncontrolled? That would be a disaster. Esther brilliantly paints the picture that Haman was the number one enemy to the king. And when she points to him in Pasuk Vav, right, in 6, identifying Haman as the guilty person, by then she has convinced Ahasuerus clearly that there is no doubt that Haman is not his friend. There's also another use of a word here. Take a look at the at the end of, one second, where am I? I just lost my place. Oh, at the very end of Pasuk Dalet, Ki ein hatzar, what's the next word? Shaveh. Shaveh is a very unusual word in Tanakh. We did see it go back to Gimel Ches, 3:8. 3:8. Let's go back to 3:8. We've seen this. Vayomer Haman lamelech, page 1255. You got to see this. This is brilliant. Vayomer Haman lamelech Achashverosh, page 1255, verse 8. Vayomer Haman lamelech Achashverosh. He's now selling the idea that the Jews should be annihilated, right? So what does he say? Yeshno am echad mefuzar mufurad ben amim. There's this one nation that's dispersed and not like any of the other nations, right? B'chol medinot malchutecha. V'dateim shonot mikolam. They have different religions. V'datei hamelech einam osem v'lamelech. What's the next words? Ein shoveh. He uses this word. This is Haman's word. Esther is using the same word, and you're in all of Tanakh, this word shoveh rarely appears. It's worthless, means nothing. Shoveh means it's no value, it's valueless. The Jews are valueless to you. Ein shoveh, they have no value, but it's an unusual word, and it's found twice in Megillat Esther. And if you take a concordance, right, and you look in it and you see where this word appears in Tanakh, very rarely. And here in this book, it appears twice. But notice who's using it. First, Haman uses it to sell the Jews to their death. And what does Esther do? She uses the same word that Haman used to sell you the idea. I'm using it now to demonstrate it wasn't a good idea. He had a different agenda than you. King, this is not good for you. And she uses the word that Haman uses, shaveh, that Haman uses. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant use. The writer of this book is not doing it by mistake. That's the point I'm noting. It's a brilliant sefer, and how the words are so powerful. You're using the word that he used, and we're throwing it back at you. I was on the phone trying to get some momentum with the idea that we should really be protesting with allowing the Palestinians to conquer the streets of America. It's absurd. It's absurd. The narrative has been conquered by the Palestinians. And one of the things I was talking to David Swisser recently, and I called him and I said, we should be using their language. What are they calling now? There's a crisis for a human crisis, right? There's humanitarian crisis. There is a humanitarian crisis and nobody's talking about it. There's another humanitarian crisis. We have hostages. Use their language, their words, and demonstrate, hey, 1 second, you're right. We agree, we're not denying. But there's a humanitarian crisis that you're lying to. Use their words, that's my point. Esther understands the power of using their words again. Yes, I'm just saying, use what, guys, though, I'm not interested in talking right now about the
Right.
Palestinian-Israeli issue. Don't get distracted. Let's keep focusing. What I'm demonstrating is when you use the words of your opponent and throw them back at them, that is a very powerful tool. And that is being done here by one word, shoveh. Let's continue.
Isn't Chauvet also used by Haman though?
I said it,
He
he is.
And then Chauvet, when he's talking to his wife, that all the glory, all the.
Yes.
No value to him.
No value, right.
It's also, so it's used
Yes.
3 times.
3 times in the Sefer. Right, very good. You picked up on that, right. Pasuk, now let's go to Pasuk Vav. So now what happens? So the king says, okay, who is the guy? And what does she do? So she's Vatomer Esther. And Esther, you have to pay close attention to how she speaks. So Esther is now responding to the king. Who is it? Ish Tsar Ve'oyev Haman Hara Hazeh. Oh, wow. Ish Tsar Ve'oyev is a Tsar Ve'oyev. What's a Tsar Ve'oyev? A Tsar Ve'oyev, it's now, she didn't say a enemy. She says an adversary and an enemy, right? This wicked Haman. Haman then, Ish Tsar Ve'oyev Haman Hara Hazeh. Hazeh? Tsar Ve'oyev? Okay. Once again, the brilliance in how she speaks is very important. The Eben Ezra notes, she doesn't say Ish Oyev. She says Tsar Ve'oyev, 2 words. Why? So the Eben Ezra says it's not by accident. Tsar Ve'oyev means that he was an enemy in the public and the private worlds. She's pointing out Achashverosh. You want to know something about Haman? He's your enemy in public. He's your enemy in private. There is nothing good about this man. He's both public and private. In other words, Esther's leaving nothing to Achashverosh's imagination, right? She's using all the power that words have to demonstrate that Haman is enemy number 1 against the king. The Rashbam remarks, and it's a Rashbam in Bereshis. He's talking about it in the story of Yosef being sold. There, the word halozeh is used. And the Rashbam there in chapter 37, Pasuk 19, remarks, halozeh is different than hazeh. Whenever you say halozeh, there's a distance. Whenever Tanakh says halozeh, there's a distance between you and the object you're talking about. When you say hazeh, what are you doing? There's no distance. He's right there. He's right here. He's standing. Now, take a look what's happening in the Rashbam. It's brilliant. Rashbam remarks that Ish Tsar Ve'oyev Haman Hara Hazeh. What's he saying? What's he saying to Achashverosh? What's she saying to Achashverosh? He's standing right here. Are you comfortable standing next to your enemy? Not at all. What do you want to do immediately when your enemy is too close to you? Immediately distance yourself from the enemy, correct? You don't want, and suddenly you're very, very concerned about the distance, about what do we call that?
Personal space.
Right. Personal space is very important here. Hazeh, the Rashbam is saying, she is building up a vision. Do you feel him, Achashverosh? He's right there. This is to amplify the physical proximity of the enemy, which is something Esther wanted that the king should feel. And how does she do that? She accomplishes it by words, right?
She plays on his paranoia.
Of course she's playing. Of course she is. Exactly. So why does she do that? In order to make Achashverosh realize the urgency of the moment that Haman is standing right there. You can't close your eyes to this Achashverosh. He's there. Hazeh. It's brilliant, right? Shoveh and Hazeh. 2 words that she uses here. Go to Pasuk Ches. V'amelech shav. So he's upset, right? Remember the story. She says, well, there's this person, and she hasn't identified the person yet, that is out to destroy me and my people. And then she says, it's it's Haman. So what does he do? V'amelech, pay attention to Pasuk Zayin. V'amelech kom b'chamato mimishte hayayin el ginat habitan. What does he do when he learns that his supposedly his most important advisor, his most important cabinet member, his Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense, all wrapped in one, is what? His enemy. What does he do? He goes off and cools down. He's blowing up. So, but he can't blow up in Esther's party. So what does he do? So he takes himself out and he walks into the garden, right? Okay, now he returns from the garden. In one word, the Rav notes, the whole story changes. What's the word? No, next pasuk, pasuk ches. V'amelech shav meginat habitan el beit mishte hayayin v'haman nofel al mita asher Esther aleh v'yomer hamelech hagam lichbosh et hamalka imi babayit v'hadavar yotze mipi hamelech upnei haman chafui. He returns. What's the word in this pasuk that everything is contingent upon? Hagam. What does he say to Esther? I mean, to Haman. Achashverosh is now talking to Haman. He returns he's cooled off. He's walked outside. He now comes back. And what does he see? He sees Haman kneeling by the bed and you know the Medrash. Everybody knows this Medrash. We learned it when we were little kids. It's a Gemara. It's a Gemara in Megillah that the Malach pushed him right before Achashverosh comes in. The Malach pushes Haman to look like he's falling on top of Esther. Oh, so now he walks in and he sees something is going on, right? In that one word, the Megillah describes the entire nace that just occurred. Achashverosh returns from cooling off and he walks in and he sees Haman thrown on Esther's couch. Achashverosh responds with one word, Hagam. What does Hagam mean? Also? And also? What do you mean and also? This word indicated now Achashverosh is totally convinced, Hagam, that there is no doubt that Esther won the moment. How does Esther win the moment? Hagam, he utters that word. He's convinced that Haman is arch enemy number one, because he not only wasn't loyal, what else was he doing? Oh, he was raping his wife. Now, the Rav refers to another story in Tanakh, where raping the ruler's wife is the demonstration of the ultimate defiance of the ruler. Do you remember where? No. Avshalom when he rapes David's concubines. That's correct. And why does in Shmuel base Perek Tezayin Psukim Chof Aleph Chof Beis Shmuel 2 chapter 16 verse 21-22, the story is recorded how Avshalom, who's the son, but he's rebelled. Sometimes our worst enemies are our own, right? We know that. He rapes his father's, David's concubines. He did this as the ultimate, the Rav points out, as the ultimate defiance of the king's rule. If not only do you rebel against the rulership, quote unquote, but you come very close, the most intimate area. So too Achashverosh views Haman, the Rav notes, in the similar light. He sees Haman falling upon Esther, and he says, oh, you're not only not loyal, but you're after my wife. You're willing to rape my wife, baboyis, in my own palace, meaning that you have no regard for that I'm king. You want to do what? Remove me from being king, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to note that Achashverosh has Haman hung on accusation that wasn't accurate. There was no proof that he wanted to rape Esther at all, correct?
That's okay.
Is that correct? There are no, but he didn't even investigate, correct? But he did have an accusation that he doesn't pursue. He has two accusations against Achashverosh. One he has to drop, and one he pursues. The pursuant, the one that causes Haman to be killed is which one? The inaccurate accusation of that you're raping my wife. And he doesn't investigate that at all. What was the accusation? That he was disloyal, correct? He was disloyal by doing what? Esther pointed it out already. By suggesting that there was an edict that Haman got signed that the Jews would be killed. That was disloyal. She's already proved. She's proved that to him. That was part of strategy one, right? Part one of the strategy was, I'm going to prove that Haman's idea of killing the Jews is not to the benefit of the king. Has she proved that? Yes, she did. She proved it to him. And that he ignores. Why?
She insinuated it very
No,
strongly.
right, but she's if you kill the Jews, you're not going to have the economy. If you kill the Jews,
Yeah,
then
he
you.
didn't
Yes,
rescind the
But
edict.
why not? Exactly, Linda. Why didn't he rescind that edict?
He didn't want to admit he was wrong.
Oh, because I'm going to put it in different words. His fingerprints. Achashverosh's fingerprints are all over that edict. He partnered with Haman. He can't accuse. And this is part of, remember, I'm telling you, Esther, remember in my opening remarks, the strategy works seamlessly because we're reading it that way. But if you're Esther, you realize you're walking on eggs. Exactly. You're really walking on eggshells. You're really walking on eggshells. Why are you walking on eggshells? Because, like I pointed out, the Gemara points out, she almost pointed to Achashverosh. You can make a slip very easily in this kind of a strategy. Very easily. I'm reading a fascinating book by Ari Hero. Ari Hero was Netanyahu. I recommend get it on Amazon. Ari Hero was the chief of staff for Netanyahu for a number of years. Ari grew up here in the shul. Ari, yes, remember as a little kid. Yes, the Hero family is the founders of Young Israel Century City. You're talking about a long time ago. Yes, early in the 70s, the end 1976, the shul was founded. So yeah, 76. So anyhow, Ari was a little boy when they made Aliyah. He was 12, I think.
Really?
Yeah. So Ari Hero just wrote his book about his experiences of being chief. Oh, it's right next to my bed. I read it. The Gemara says, when do you do these things? When it's neither night nor day. Meaning when I'm going into twilight, twilight zone at 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm going finally to sleep, then I'm reading a page or two. But what?
I read before bed. It's usually
So
paragraph.
yeah, exactly. So I just read the story in the book about, yeah, my brother's keeper, right. So I just read the story in the book, the very sad story in the book of, I'm talking to you about walking on eggshells. When you have a strategy against an enemy, it's very difficult to we're reading this so simply. We've read this Megillah all these years, and we celebrate, and it sounds like so magical in many ways, and so simple. And on another level, that's the brilliance of the book. But it's so difficult to realize what she's going through. And so why I'm mentioning this book is because I just read the very sad story about when the Hamas kidnapped Nachshon Waxman, Zichrono Livracha, may his blood be revenged, and how they finally found where he was. It's a fascinating chapter there that he writes about how they finally and they sent the best, most probably in the world, people that know how to resolve this in terms of a military operation, and it failed because they couldn't get through the door fast enough. They couldn't get through. You read it. They couldn't get through the door. They found the house until they found where he was being held. And they finally found it. And it was Friday night. If you remember, I remember it vividly. I remember the next, right? Right. Everybody was like, and that the 100,000 people went to the Kotel. He mentions all of this. And he says, and they found, because they did, the intelligence in Eretz Yisrael. So they found the driver who they had dressed up as from Jews. And that's how he was hiking. He was hitchhiking. He and he took a ride. And this wasn't the only time that they were dressed up like Haredim. So he took a ride with them. They took him into a village and into a house, and it was a metal door. Why am I telling you this? When you're doing a strategy, both militarily and like Esther is doing a strategy, it can go wrong just on a half a second. Can be the difference between life and death. And that's what Chazal meant. The angel came and pushed her hand. It was going the wrong way. The Medrash doesn't mean that the Medrash is telling you what? Please appreciate she could have made the mistake. It could have been her death, right? Okay, that's all I'm pointing out. It's interesting to note that, right? Achashverosh has Haman hung on false accusations for that reason. Okay, the Rav notes that this story teaches us, and this I began, and this is how I will end. The Rav notes that this parak in the Megillah, which is the second shortest parak, has one of the most important messages, not the miracle per se, a rather more important message for us. And that is, it teaches us that in history, God often ordains one person to be the person that's going to change history. In this case, the Rav notes, it's a woman. It's way beyond, it's way before its time, isn't it? It's a woman. And the Rav notes, she doesn't get any advice and any consultation with Mordechai. Right?
They were separated.
Exactly. First of all, there was a physical separation. There was no way that they were communicating, correct? She couldn't turn to Mordechai and say, how am I going to handle this? So
It was in the beginning.
yes, he initiated, but once she takes over, what happens? And she's alone. And she's alone. She says, Lech kenosis kol haYehudim. Right? She's in the hands of God. That's correct. And she does it. And the Rav says, and even if she could have consulted with Mordechai, she wouldn't have been able to listen to Mordechai because Hashem wanted her to be the one in history that was going to change history. In other words, it becomes what I call the great man theory of history. You can study history and chapters in history and say, is it great men? And I don't mean men, I mean human beings, right? But we used to speak like that in English. Men could mean women as well. Great people that change history, and you can study, and you have to study that person. Or is it the time and the place and everything that happens with it? It's
great person.
What?
Or does history create the great
That's
person?
correct. And what's this? And what the Rav is arguing, that this chapter in Megillat Esther is certainly telling you the great man history, the great man approach to history, right? It's Esther. Esther is needed. Esther runs with the ball. It's Esther that all of the issues are on her shoulders. All of the pain and the angst is all on her shoulders, and she has to walk a very careful line.
She does it beautifully.
She does it brilliantly, right? Yes, it's beautiful. It's beautiful in its brilliance, but she's dressed in Ruach HaKodesh. And if you can't see that, that's what Chazal is telling us. If you can't read this book with realizing that her royal garments are what? Are Ruach HaKodesh, then you miss the whole story. Because you can't read. It's like a doctor recently said to me, he says, I tell my colleagues, if you don't see God in your practice, then then you're blind. You know, he's there. It's the natural. And this book is all about the natural being the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is a brilliant chapter. Just to wrap up again. Charvona. Who's Charvona? Charvona Zochu Latov. He's Charvona Zochu Latov. He's Charvona. He's a chamberlain. He's a chamberlain. He's a good guy.
Is he the same one who alerted, the king that you have forgotten to reward someone, like when the king
No.
couldn't sleep? There was a
No, it
big
doesn't
word.
say. Go back to chapter 8. Go back. Well, okay. 1 second.
I don't believe that was by chance.
1 second. Where is that? That's Perik Dalet. I'm sorry.
No, that-
Where he's not sleeping well.
It's chapter 6.
Yeah,
Chapter 6, I'm sorry. Balayla, no,
it gives him-
no. You must say because we should give Mordechai big son of Seresh. No. Vayomer HaMelech man asa yikor gdula. Vayomer na'arei HaMelech. We're not told their names. We're not told their names. No, king, you haven't rewarded Mordechai. No, we're not told their names. Okay, so just to wrap up again, it's the second shortest chapter. This is the chapter of Haman's failure and fall, but it is the brilliance of Esther and how she's able to work a strategy that is going to do what? Change directions, flip the table,
Right.
and make Achashverosh realize that Haman is arch enemy number
The
1.
main thing is that I think to try and prove that he's looking to take his crown. And that's really what.
We talked about that last week,
Right, I think
right?
that's the.
That is what
That is what
yeah,
really would enrage him the most.
he does.
He's looking
does.
to take your place.
That's correct.
And your wife.
And she works on
More
that.
so than.
And she works on that. Okay, before we wrap for the day, a question for you, and if you're willing, I'm willing to prepare for it. This was the last year for this year on Megillat Esther. Purim Bezrat Hashem is Sunday, Saturday night, Sunday. Tomorrow's Tanis Esther. So yes, this weekend is Purim. So next week we're Shloshim Yom Lifnei Achag. We're 30 days before Pesach. I'm willing to give you a number of shiurim on Haggadah, if you want,
Yes.
by a show of yes.
Yeah.
Haggadah. Okay, so then I will focus. I'm onto this thing that I want to study the Rav's Torah in particular when it comes to all of these. The Rav is just Rav Soloveitchik, the Rav, the real Rav. So okay, so we will do Haggadah through the eyes of Rav Soloveitchik, and we will see some brilliant ideas. Next week, same time, same place, same station.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Rabbi,
yes.
hi,
Yes, Shelley.
Rabbi, hi, good morning, a beautiful shir as always, thank you.
Thank you, Shelley.
You're welcome, I would appreciate if you repeat, when I was a little girl, I remember the Harrow family being one of my fathers and Rabbi Jacob Levine, alav shalom,
Yeah.
and down in West Adams, and my
Yes.
dad's like beginning jobs there, and the Harrow family was wow, and the Bernsteins. Could you tell me what you said about Ari Harrow? What was his job? Captain of what?
No. He was chief of staff for Bibi Netanyahu.
He was chief of staff.
Yeah,
for
go
Netanyahu.
online.
My brother's.
Okay, I will. I'll
Shelley, go
Google,
online.
Google
Okay.
Ari Harrow, right?
Okay, yes, Ari Harrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everybody should have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks.